I can't tell if anyone's there, but I'm just going to start the event anyway. It's going to be very cool and exciting. So first up today, just show the bracket. Blaze had to drop out, so Immortal will be taking him. So first up, it is Salofs and Blaze. No, Immortal. Salofs versus Immortal first. See if they can make it to the lobby. It is Salofs. Yes, you are the higher seed. Salofs is the higher seed. So I shouldn't need to reintroduce the ban system. So social media. There we go. So TP Rail, Immortal, apparently not at all afraid of Salos's rail ship. I'm pretty sure that this is how it lost the last round, was picking a rail ship against picking an avoider against a TB rail, but maybe he's confident. I wouldn't be. It's certainly one of the ways that you can lose. Those who are viewing, please tell me if I'm being heard accurately, helpfully, accessibly. Salof's glorious ash ring. We saw it dominate last tournament. I painted it this time around versus Immortal ship. Painted it himself. Very well done. Looks nice. First shot bounces off. Was expected. But the first shot is not the problematic one. And now Immortal has a problem because his center section very vulnerable. And this is the issue with this is that the opponent can just fire around the shields if you lean too far. So you kind of have to expect where they're aiming. And without the engines, Immortal lost a control room first off. And also does not have enough thrust to resist. So I think it's pretty safe to say that Immortal is already dead. Salofs is gonna just kill him. No control. That is a blistering first match. So let's see if Immortal does the same thing. It would certainly be one of the choices ever. Where you see, based on this banning system, you can force your opponent to pick a specific ship. And they force you to pick a specific ship, ultimately. And when you do that, it essentially makes it so that you have to be very careful with the ship that you force your opponent to pick. So by Immortal reducing Salos's picks to just the TB rail, Salos decides, hey, I'm just going to reduce it to the Voider because that's not going to work out. I am going to cry. I didn't move the bracket. It's okay. It's okay. It doesn't matter. I probably need to save that. The replay TB. South showing his hand way too early. TB rail. Immortal learning his lesson, getting rid of the TB rail. Now Salofs has the option to ban 2 ships. Voider and Missile. So now Immortal is left with his rail ship that has nukes on the back. Against Salofs' orbital wall. Let's see how it works out. I'm not sure, I'm not confident that it will. But you know, that's their problem. So we haven't seen this orbital wall thus far. It's pretty standard, has flak. Flak was recently massively buffed. Pretty powerful. I won't be surprised if we actually see nukes get shot down, which has occurred. Screaming into combat. Immortal trying to break through the front, understandable. And if Salofs can just continue this ram, then that's kind of a really bad situation. Because Immortal can't do anything here, and Salofs is just going to continue to chew through that front. Despite having energy constraints, it's not at all an issue, and Immortal is just completely stuck, unfortunately. Losing rails already. Is managing to get free a little bit, and hopefully Salofs will slide off. Immortal does manage to free himself from Salofs, but it won't matter for long, because now Salofs is in the same exact position. Salofs is commenting on the fact that Immortal, there is a exploit in the game that has yet to be fixed, where you can aim nukes past their 200 degrees of aiming. And it is banned, but given the fact that Immortal is probably going to be losing this match immediately anyways, it's not the biggest of issues. It is not... It was not advertised or made well apparent. Tactic is not tournament legal, so that is partially my fault. But for future reference, for all participants, do not use the nuke trick to aim past your given 200 degrees, because it's not legal. Don't do it. Mortal might be turning on his lag switch now that he's losing. A common joke. But yeah, Salof's just gonna destroy the reactor. Immortal forfeits. Understandable. Immortal out of the tournament very quickly. But that's alright. We hope to see you next time, Immortal. So, now, Salof's moving on. Not a huge surprise. Versus... Now, Game Night versus Lunestro. Game night with their iconic dark blue ships. Very, very dark blue. Very nice blue. And let's see if Lunestro is coming. It said that they checked in. And Lunestro is second, so game night decides who bans first. Who bans first? So Lunestro checked in. And the thing is that if you check in and then don't show up, you're blacklisted from the next tournament because you're causing problems for the event organizers, which is just me. So I really hope that Lunestro shows up. Well, Lunestro is not here, so Slowking versus Mint. Right place for that. Slowking versus Bochi. Slowking, very timely. Good for him, as is befitting a previous champion. And Mint is here. Nice. Next match is off to a great start. King. Mint with the lovely pink ships. Love these. Alright. Participants are participating. Slowking is deciding who bans first, and he will. He's picking between Mint's pink 3 ships and gets rid of the rails. So now Mint bans 2. Let's see what Mint decides to get rid of then. So now it is Slowking's highly responsive to prayers, which is a TB missile ship, versus Mint's ultralight nuke, or their traditional large shield missile orbiter. So it's 2 missiles, and I think that this is probably going to be ideal for Mint, I would say. Slowking is the higher seed, which means that they're roughly considered the better player. However, Mint has bigger numbers. They have more missiles, they have more armor, because Slowking wasted it on tractor beams that might not do anything. So it depends on how effectively Slowking can wield the tractor beams, spreading damage. Because Mint just has more missiles. 8 exactly, or 2 factories worth. As well as large shields, more armor, etc. So I'm very curious to see what tactics Slowking has in mind for making the tractor beams actually worthwhile, because very questionable choice, I would say. When the very traditional missile orbiters, suffice to say, very tried, tested, and proved. Coming in hot, might cut through some of the side armor. A lot of damage already. Fortunately, that vial will hit a lot of the rock and be wasted, so that's unfortunate timing from Mint. Ideally, a player would have held their missiles to hold fire and then launch them after clearing it, so that could be a equalization of damage. But Mint continues to not take too much damage, has a lot of missiles coming in from the rear, which is not what you want. Well, obviously. And so all these missiles coming in, Mint seems to have a more consistent delivery of them, whereas Slowking is more all at once. So he's not microing them, which is probably understandable given that tractor beams take a lot of attention. As far as I can tell, Mint is just going, having a normal day as usual. The tractor beams have not done anything, to my knowledge. So we'll have to ask the players after the fact, or see what they say in the chat, and I respond to that. Missiles, continuing to missile. I really hope that there isn't too many more of these missile versus missile matches. They're exceptionally exciting to cast. Slowking is probably pushing on this corner to prevent Mint from turning, as you can see from all those thrusters firing. So Mint is trying to turn. All these missiles are now directly aimed, looking in a bad position. Oh, that's one of the 4 modules down. Mint now has double the amount of firepower. And is now tanking all of the missiles on the front, so the tractor beams still prove to be completely useless. Especially when Slowking is bleeding out. There's also a supply line if those fires don't get put out, which means that it's going to be effectively 2 launchers that are dead. Or 2 sections that are dead, making it so the Mint has 3 times the amount of firepower. So it depends on Slowking's fire crew, which seem to be completely failing at their roles. They could be fired, you would say, but that would be an awful joke, so I won't. So let's continue to move in. Mint, even if they lose all their front armor, the shields make it so it's extremely difficult to actually get consistent damage. Like, even if you get missiles through, the shields will take so much damage because they just regenerate. Slowking doesn't have that luxury at all, where so Mint has much, much higher durability, which is only magnified by the fact that Slowking has much less due to having so much less firepower. And it's an important note, having 2 more modules as opposed to Slowking's 4 is a huge difference because you kill your opponent 50% faster. It's in a vacuum, of course. And opponent that takes more damage than you is presumably going to only have that gap increase, as demonstrated here. Because now Mint is doing twice as much damage. So it's a self-confirming cycle, and Slowking getting stuck on Mint like this is not going to be good because it hinders his movement, which is what he's invested in. And just losing more launchers, the left segment is pretty damaged. Mint can probably just kind of do whatever they want. They likely didn't need to get so close to Slowking. I think that ideally they'd be running away, so they never really entered range of the tractor beams to prevent Slowking from ever getting a advantage with them. Like, it clearly doesn't matter because Slowking is still losing pretty handily here. But Slowking manages to hang on. Such is the skill of the high-level players that even if they've, I would say, clearly lost, they continue to ignore it. I mean, you can always claw your way back in, even if it's improbable. and in a certain sense, lasting against completely stacked odds is a skill in and of itself, even if it doesn't yield anything. Slowking still failing to roll damage, losing more missiles. Still has firepower, I suppose, but it's just look at how much in terms of like the missiles flowing this way versus those flowing that way. It's not working out for Slowking. And the issue with tractor beams is that as you lose mass, you stop being as effective in imparting force on your opponent. Because if you push a heavier object and you don't have like sufficient momentum or whatever, it just pushes you away. Slowking has no control, so he will just be eating these missiles if crew don't come back. Common issue. Crew came back, but ramping the thrusters up is going to be problematic. So, Mint wins with 6% of their health. Only 6%. Essentially all just ancillary damage because it was just armor. So now we will... Now Slowking bans on the... Decides who bans first. Let's see if Slowking decides to ban first again. Because he can, of course, decide to let Mint have the stage and ban first if he wants to. And gets rid of the rail traps. Very cool. I'm curious because Slowking missiles and rails. So now it's just a nuke ultralight. Let's see if Mint goes for a mirror match. Should he be able to take it back? I'm not sure. Should he be able to take it back? I'm asking the chat. Normally I have a second caster to agree with me or disagree with me. So, chat can decide. Have to wait for the delay, because there's... Yeah, have to wait for the delay, because there's like a 5-minute delay. It makes the connection easier to maintain. It's worth noting that you can take however long you want. You don't have to say... You don't have to ban as quickly as you can, though I appreciate banning as quickly as you can. You don't have to. So let's see. Well, there's... Slowking is saying the Mint has external help, but there's nothing wrong with asking other players for assistance. Still equal, somewhat equal. So I will depend on the last person that says anything. Alright. So we've come to the conclusion that Slowking will be given the second chance, but give up the ability to pick who goes first, who bans first. Worth noting that this will not be occurring. It is the only time it will be occurring. And if you mess up what you say, then you will just have to live with the consequence. Mint goes first and bans the rail traps. Mint continually hate those ships. So now Slowking can make the same mistake if he wants. See if Slowking is gonna do the same thing. It shouldn't be funny. Slowking taking his sweet time. Slowking understandably taking a certain amount of time. It feels like he's in a very bad position. I'm not necessarily sure I understand it, but I'm not going to say anything until the match starts because I don't want to influence Slowking, who is presumably listening to the stream in the background. Slowking bans rails and can ban the missile orbiter or the nuke ship. Now, personally, I think that the rail ship... No, I take that back. Missiles. So, Mint, what do you ban? Here we go, then. No mirror match. So, Mint has nukes, and nukes are very good. And the issue with this is that look at all this point defense. 24 point defense from Mint, and all those shields. And as you might have noticed, Slowking only has missiles. So if you were there... Mint, I'm going to cry if you get stuck on this rock. Oh, man, this is bothering me. I believe in you, Mint. This is certainly one of the ways this could have gone. Mint does manage to launch the nukes at least, does a significant amount of damage. Mint, surprisingly, despite getting stuck on the rock, is not out of it. Slowking took a huge amount of damage because he did nothing to dodge the nukes there. So despite the fact that Mint didn't take advantage of the point defense, still seems as though they're gonna win. Slowking calling a preemptive GG to mark his death. I'm kind of surprised that Slowking didn't pick the ultralight ship against nukes, against Mints for the sake of a mirror match. Since that would have been possible here. I'm pretty sure Slowking is mentioning that he had a flowchart that he was following based on another player's input to try and win. And he's remarking that it completely failed. So pretty pretty interesting how that turns out. Mint seems as though they're not going to be using point defense, and Slowking is going to drag it out with tractor beams. I'm probably going to highlight this match, but cut out this part. Hmm. Well, be that as it may, if it's true, it is the case that there is no rules against, external picking. And ideally, if this is to be an esport at some point, of course, then presumably one would be doing such things constantly, incessantly. So Slowking still managing to drag on his life. Not sure to what extent, to what end, but it's pretty clearly he's lost here. Mint choosing to turn the point defense on, I'm glad, because it's gonna be a lot more effective than the nukes. So an interesting note that sometimes tournament participation can be irrelevant or have different things to consider than sheer skill, which is very interesting and something that I would say is not ideal, but there's unfortunately no workaround. It's just how it plays out sometimes. So it seems as though having like a massive flowchart beforehand can help determine the outcome. But failure to prepare is preparing to fail, as one might. Territron. So air is, oh no, no, I announce that the password is in announcements, and then people ask for the password. It's one of the things ever. A lot of people in the Discord chat are uh air. So air is higher seed. So, Walt personally contacted me. Apparently, there is a vital crash that needs a patch right now during the tournaments. So, after this match, I have to close Cosmoteer, re-download that at some point. So, the stream may have to turn off for a second, which is unfortunate. Immortal, known for their very long naming schemes because of the very fancy patch that one must get. I recommend you close Cosmoteer and get the patch right now. So Territron is deciding the two ships of heirs to ban. Now Heir decides to ban Territron's ion ship or his missile orbiter. And I we just saw what occurs if you let your opponent use a normal missile orbiter against your TB missile orbiter. So I would say Heir makes the right decision there. And now we go. So here we have Emperor's ship. Heir did not test their ship. So the issue is that they have, let's see. Issue is that they have a ship with not perfect hotkeys because they didn't test their ship, but they submitted it and then it was too late to fix because it was tournament time. So Heir might have a problem. Let's see if they were able to hotfix their hotkeys. Let's see if Territron can sufficiently dodge the missiles while resist being flipped. Because Heir is going to be trying to manipulate Territron to prevent the shields from getting in the way. Though, if the missiles are focused really well, they can likely break through the shields pretty. Not all of them, but sufficient of them. Already some reactor damage. Typically takes a little bit longer. At least Territron didn't lose it there, which is a very real possibility that could have occurred. So what Heir wants to have happen is the missiles come in from an angle like that, so the point defense can't shoot at them. So the 12 point defense with no recharge, going to be keeping Territron alive for the time being. But once those run out, it's going to be very problematic. And so the issue is that the ion prisms rotate so slowly that Territron, because he's being flipped about so much, can't keep target on the front, which is kind of a problem because he needs to be doing that. And ideally, I think that Territron would have a splitting function in his ship because it's very distinctly three sections. Unfortunately, did not design it to have that. So, unless the two middle reactors get blown up, there is not going to be splitting occurring. Territron, still in a bad position, has to rotate his shields and weapons away from his opponent to try and prevent the missiles from hitting him, which is always a very bad position. And because he's so close to Heir, Heir is just going to have a field day with how effectively he can spin around Territron. Territron also ran out of power for his point defense. His crew got destroyed, so he had to rapidly turn off parts of his ship. He lost a control room and crew left one of the other control rooms. So now he's down to 1/3 of his ship actually functioning. Let's see if the crew returns to it. It does not seem as though they will. So, Territron's in a very bad way. And this is the benefit having tractor beams, is that you can more actively and effectively basically just make it so your opponent can't do anything that they want to, because they're so busy just spinning and getting stuck. So now all these missiles are probably going to be coming in. Let's see if they hit anything vital. They keep... Missiles keep like snagging their reactor, but not actually dealing damage to it. So Territron's now stuck against the rock, being pushed into it. Finally loses a reactor. Slammed into the rock again. Territron saying well played, likely going to forfeit. It is pretty much decided, I would say. Unfortunately, the point defense, though good, did not save him. You typically need more, and Air was very adept at making it come in from the sides, which always changes how it plays out. So the last control room is exposed from Territron, still trying. Only has 6 ion prisms left. No, that's true, but only has 6 of them firing. And that's not going to get through that armor in any reasonable time frame. They're just kind of probably looking at their nails, seeing what's nearby to grab a snack if they can. Doesn't even need to do anything at this point because Territron can't move, and Air, of course, wins. So, um, so let's see if Territron, same thing. Hmm. So it seems as though I forgot or did not address that Territron has 2 ships with point defense. That's kind of a problem. Because point defense are considered weapons, so you can't have 2 ships with it. That's kind of dumb. So Territron submitted a ship very late. Decently late. Give me a second. So, this is... Yeah, this tournament was probably the most loose in terms of the rules. And if you fail to properly vet your ships to not have weapons, you're just going to be kicked from the tournament. Okay, so... Territron chooses to ban the mesothelium. So, Air seems as though they want the same arrangement. And I'm sure that's the greatest move, because Neuralgia isn't strong. But Air seems to think it's fine, so let's go. So, Neuralgia. This is fortunately not the point defense ship that took years to kill its opponent. And something I think will actually be relevant here is the small drone ship with the 4 cannons. Because you see, if you look at Territron's ship, look at all that exposed reactor thruster flesh. You can just fire cannons into that and have a great time. Fortunately, the control rooms are protected. But if you lose, if you have cannons that set fires to things, it's going to be a problem. Unless, of course, air just decides to pilot it straight into death. And that's one of the tactics you could use, but I guess it's not going to be exciting and relevant. So, air is going to hopefully flip Territron here, using superior thrust and the tractor beams. And then shoot all manner of cannons and the 2 one-off nukes into Territron's back side of a ship. Firing around the shields, air recognizes that he cannot break through those shields, most likely. And that is exactly what we want here for air. Territron getting flipped. Tractor beams are stronger when they have this amount of leverage from this angles, as well as when they're closer. And as you can see, air is going to be moving forward with their incredibly fast ship and just bullying Territron around, throwing him around to his heart's content, and there's nothing he can really do about it. And despite the fact that he's not taking damage from the front, those ions can't break through those shields. It's just not going to happen. Especially when he's shaking this much, and the ions are doing very little to actually properly track. So air being very careful to not get stuck on the asteroid, that's certainly a way to close it. But even if that were to occur, air doesn't exactly have a problem because the tractor beams can just push him off. So Territron is trying to put his back to the asteroid to prevent it from being flipped, because if you just push into it, then you're fine. However, air knows the old ways and can just come from an angle and push him off. And now there's this massive hole because he lost the large reactor. Now he has no control because the crew on both sections managed to leave. Now Territron has no control. Even if he turned everything on board off, he would still have no control. So air should probably turn the tractor beams off or turn them to grab Territron. Because there's nothing he can do to resist it. And he forfeits, understandably. So air will move on. Now it is Nug versus Nismus. So I saw some amount of betting going on between between the outcome of Nismus and Nug. Betting ship paint, likely that they will paint the other person's ship, or they will get somebody else to paint someone else's ship based on the outcome. So Nug, very confident about it, is the person who proposed the bet. Let's see if it was the right thing to be betting on. So Nug as the higher seed, the third seed of the entire tournament, as a previous event winner, is a scary player. And bans the tractor beam missile orbiter. Those are very strangely common for some reason. It's kind of a surprise because they are not as good as mainstream missile orbiters and yet have been seen so much more this tournament. Uh, well, and I'm going to assume that Nick is the chip. Yes. So both players don't have an issue, so this is what they want. So this is a funny thing because depending on the avoider skill, it's either a complete sweep for them against the deck cannon rammer, or if they suck, it is just a strict win for the deck cannon rammer. And Too Much Aaron, I think, demonstrated that if you do not have the sufficient skill, it is a very sad match for the avoider. Nismus, however, seems to know what they're doing, and they don't have to deal with hooks. However, Nug is a very scary player, and is using the best version of deck rammers for this particular engagement, I would say. So let's see if Nismus has what it takes. And is definitely doing a good job thus far. Ideally, you wouldn't be taking shield damage because that makes it so if you get a hit there, then you have a problem. Also, the reactors are being stressed. So Nismus isn't switching directions nearly enough. Losing a large shield is catastrophic. This next one might hurt. Nismus fortunately is now jockeying back and forth out of position again, but still, losing that large shield is very bad, and it also cut off energy to smaller shields and destroyed a smaller shield as well. So he is taking hits, which ideally you don't do at all whatsoever. So Nug, even despite being in a arguably bad matchup, is still managing to deal a little bit of damage, claw his way through the matchup. And there we go. More damage. Losing the large shield in the center like that is a very big issue. So Nug was disengaging for a little bit to recharge the shields. This combination of armor and shields is very strong. And even though the disruptors can tear through the shields, that amount of armor is still very difficult to get through. And if you just disengage to let shields recharge, then it just has so much health that you have to deal with. Nug choosing to disengage rather than try and skirt around the asteroid. Smart move, I would say. However, if Nismus is smart, they will now take advantage of the asteroid that has been presented to them. See, they can very easily fly around the asteroid because they have more thrust for maneuvering, unless they touch it. And Nug is doing an excellent job ramming. Loses both large shields. Oh no. Nug doing fantastic to prevent Nismus from getting away. But Nismus is breaking out the old tricks of getting the ship to kill itself via an asteroid. Let's see if Nug can get off in time. This might be real bad. This is the main reason I would say that this is one of the main reasons why this is a very terrible matchup for the Deccan Rammer is that since you're all forward thrust and you hit the asteroid, you just die. So despite the fact that Nismus was losing, Nug has now very safely lost this match. Understandable that Nug is a little bit irritated. It's never a good way to go out. And now Nug will be deciding who bans first again. I forgot that there is some amount of in-game audio that is typically there, sound effects and whatnot, and I unfortunately forgot about that. But now we shall have the delightful cannons. Missile fire. Can't believe it took this long. Nug. Here we are. Missiles again. So tractor beam missile order is really scary to everyone. I can't say I understand it, but I have to trust Nug's wisdom as the person participating. and rail and nuke. So, I mean, it's not like the safest of matchups, but if Nug is careful, they can they can fight the Avoider and win. They seem to have demonstrated. It's just that he has to not get stuck on the rock. So Nug seems to want to do the matchup again. So Nug is remarking that there is no shields in front of the control room. So he's speculating or assuming what would happen is that it would continue to flip him, and then the rails would just continue to dig through that area until it hit the control. These two shields would probably protect it a little bit, and, you know, rotating and such, but it's still not ideal. I would say that with how close Nug got, this is probably going to be the better matchup. You just have to be real careful. So, Nismus is doing the ideal tactic of staying as close to the asteroid as reasonably possible. You see, the opponent cannot rotate it around it as closely, as tightly to the asteroid. So Nug is probably going to be waiting it out, understandable. And there's fortunately no asteroid near the center. The closest is this one. And because Nug is faster, he can just run the entire match. So let's see what occurs here. Don't get stuck on that asteroid. Nug trying to bait Nismus out, trying to take advantage of Nismus's potential sense of pride or more likely impatience. However, Nismus is a competent player, has been here for a few tournaments, has done excellently in them, though not winning. They are a strong contender, if any, and they play competently. So I don't expect them to come out, which means that we're probably going to be waiting 7 minutes for the next, the actual fight. Nug using interesting tactics of trying to draw upon that impatience, that sense of ego. Of course, tilting your opponent is completely within the rules currently. There is nothing against being mean, rude in the chat. So Nismus is essentially taking that bait, I would say, by going away from asteroids and now engaging Nug. Now, this could be that Nismus is trying to, yeah, go back to the asteroid and just deal ship damage in the process while retaining the same active defensive maneuver where he goes in circles. However, Nug is not one to accept this and is already close to ramming Nismus again. Very not good for Nismus. Nug is also doing an excellent job making sure that the deck cannons are being aimed properly. Normally the issue is that they spend so much time rotating that they never stay on target and hit the target. But due to expert control and piloting, is making that not an issue. Nismus is desperately trying to get away, and is being somewhat successful, but still taking a lot of damage in the process. No large shields on the right segment. Large shields are a very important defensive tool, so losing any of them is a very noteworthy thing. And it's worth noting that the more weapons that Nismus loses, the worse off he is, because you need sufficient weapons to break through the shields in meaningful time. And as you lose more and more weapons, those shields become harder and harder to deal with. Nismus hits the rock, unfortunately loses a lot of speed. Let's see if Nug can punish that. Nismus going in a figure 8 around these asteroids, which is probably the best move. Nug taking shield damage. The actual shields are taking damage at this point, rather than just their projections. But has another ram on Nismus. Let's see if he avoids the asteroid this time. Nicely done. As you can see, the deck cannons are pointed so far away though, which is just very difficult to try and account for and deal with. So Nismus has been doing a better job this time of target firing the left side, and Nug, or potentially Nug, has done a worse job of spreading the damage. Both, neither, etc. So Nug might be going back to the center to properly wait. It seems like that might be the case. Decides that, you know, I'm taking too much damage here. I am more invested in winning, so I'm just gonna wait, which is completely respectable, if not advisable, in terms of trying to win. So Nismus is trying to get to the center asteroid, I would say, for ideal placement for the upcoming stall. Nug decides that he doesn't want to deal with the asteroid and is just gonna space further. The minor damage on the sides and rear is completely ignorable. It's effectively not there for all the effectiveness it does. And is choosing to engage again. And the issue is that each of these charges does a lot of damage. Two more shields were removed and the reactor was damaged, so it's a awful arrangement. So, not sure what Nug means there. I'll have to ask after the event is over, or Nug will be answering it shortly. Could be Nug is already irritated about his loss here, which I suppose is understandable, but it's always worth noting that being tilted is a good way to make it so that your chances become very, very little, as opposed to small. Because it's not too late. It's not too late ever. However, what Nug decides to do in the upcoming engagement, or for the rest of the engagement, is a curious thing to me. I'm pretty sure that the reactor there doesn't chain into the control room, so theoretically he can survive that, losing that. You know, obviously he does not want to lose it. Here we go, kind of catching Nismus by surprise. Unfortunately, because he has to rotate so widely to protect his left side that's damaged, he is unfortunately not in a position to fire back as he charges. So loses another shield, almost loses the second, takes a little bit, slightly bit more reactor damage on his reactor. And that is an excellent shot, using the momentum of the ship to line up the shots. Unfortunately, it misses the reactor because Nismus turns in time. But it is an excellent demonstration of using the momentum of your ship to line up your shot to deal more damage. If it had been aimed at a different place, it likely would have broken the shields, potentially breaking through the armor and hitting the reactor. Unfortunately, Nug doesn't want to aim for that side anymore. He was likely aiming for the center, and Nismus was already getting out of the way quickly enough. So, Nug is moving very evasively, and is running out of corner armor on his left side, as well as side armor on his left side, and the reactor is getting awfully low. Still doing an excellent job of focusing on his opponent, on making sure his opponent doesn't deal with it. And if he remains trapped here, then he's in a bad way. Those are directly aiming at his reactor though, and there it goes. However, it is an equal trade, and now Nismus is down to 2/3 of his ship. And even if that side is now exposed, Nug is still pretty fine in terms of movement and has no damage in firepower. So I would say Nug now has the advantage here. And it's worth noting that even though Nismus does lose a lot of weight, thank you. That's quite the insult. I prefer your mother was, I don't know, whatever, your father smelt of elderberries, something from Monty Python, etc. But now Nismus is going to be playing very defensively, no longer joking about, knows that it's serious. Trying to get rid of the rear reactor, as that now represents more thrust. But Nug is not having it. Excellent shot. Not over yet, but it's getting there. Nismus, unfortunately not switching directions as necessary, continues too long in one direction, and cannot dodge those. And as you can see, now that it's now 4 laser blasters and a disruptor, he is not dealing damage in any significant time frame. and is only taking damage because Nug is just ripping through it with the ludicrously high damage of the deck cannon rounds. Might be running out of ammo at some point. Yes, it's largely out of ammo, so Nismus can just potentially tank or continue baiting out shots that just miss, and that'd be problematic for Nug. So that is a potential winning strategy. Nug is not being very thrifty with his little remaining ammo here. Is trying to get the one remaining kill shot necessary of like this reactor or such. And almost loses the control room. Oh my. Only a few more shots left. Unfortunately, those blasters are now disconnected completely from energy, so protect the control room and you win, Nug. Oh man, that's scary. Nismus doesn't realize that he doesn't have any more ammo in those. Already out of energy in one. 2 shots left. Which is enough if he aims them perfectly to take out the bridge. So, Nismus, please set those to hold fire. Coming down to the wire here. Nismus trying to dodge the few remaining cannon shots that might be left. This is what you want to be in the position for. Oh, that's the shots wasted. So now it is whoever can ram better. Nismus is probably going to be in a slightly better position because of the maneuverability. However, Nug is at higher average health, and Nismus does not recognize that the ring is closed or something, or is having control issues. So I think that's going to be it. I think that Nug managed to win this. Very nicely done here. The insult of Glue Eater seems to have won him the match. It is possible that they could be screaming at one another in a Discord call, as you can. And Nismus has his control room disintegrate. So now it is 1-1. Nug celebrating his victory, but it's not over yet. Still go either way. So now Nismus decides who bans first, which has been not the precedent. Nismus being largely more respectful, not resorting to such underhanded tactics as calling your opponent a glue eater. But let's see how it plays out. So, Nismus has yet to decide who bans first. Nismus decides that he bans first. Nug, please. I can just end the AI player. So now the 2 bans of Nug, he can make it so that he faces one of the specific ships. I assume he's going to ban the missiles on the TB rail again. And then Nismus is probably going to ban the deck cannon ship. I'm worried about it winning. Sure. And then Nug. Would Nug choose to fight? So weird. Is he assuming Nismus is going to pick the rammer? Yeah, he's like, this. I'm not sure what Nug's plan here is. Insulting his opponent more so. Unfortunately, insulting your opponent will not save you. Calling the guy that's running at you with a sword names will not stop him from stabbing you. Even if his feelings, like, at worst, are hurt. So we had a similar matchup to this. I can't remember who, but Nismus was using this very ship to push at a deck cannon ship, and it being torn apart. I believe it was Cool Gamertag, and it was featured on the thumbnail of the highlights of the last match. So Nug clearly didn't do his studies, which seems to be a common trend for the high seed players, and might just suffer another loss here. Oh, that's a good tilt. Nismus unfortunately cannot capitalize on it. Might be invested in getting to the control room, which of course is very vulnerable, as Nug himself pointed out. And that's already some amount of damage on it. Very not good for Nug. Definitely may have been a fluke to let his opponent pick the TB rail, and is doing a good job of protecting it, but will not get many more chances to have clean shots at the TB rail with the deck cannons, which is, in a certain sense, better at avoiding the deck cannon shots because it can force the opponent to tilt. So instead of dodging the deck cannon shots, you force your opponent to miss, as well as just being very hard to catch because of how like actively moving it is. Nismus suffering from logistical issues though. Some of the rails are offline, not a full clean volley. Creates some damage in the side armor, so if he gets tilted again, he can puncture that, potentially shoot at the reactor, or clear a row of deck cannons. Only one shield blocking that. Holding fire excellently. Well done from Nismus. I can't tell if the rails are set to hold fire or fire at target with a cleared target. Oh. Knocks all the shields offline in front of the reactor, control room. And flips the tractor beam aiming. There we go. That's a good roll. Gonna be aiming at that corner, probably? No. Was ideally probably going to be aiming from the reactor, for the reactor, but did not rotate quickly enough in time. It's worth noting that Nug is piloting a much simpler ship in terms of piloting, whereas Nismus has to control push and pull, where it pushes and pulls, the rail targeting, all very actively. Which, suffice to say, is very, very difficult, and it's impressive that it's going this well, I would say. And, Nismus appears to have the target assigned to that rear reactor. Oh! Nug loses the reactor. Nug still losing control, insulting his opponent. Vicious words to try and get back the damage as best he can, failing to do so. Will likely not be resisting tractor beams nearly as well because he lost roughly half of his thrust there. Or will be losing half of his thrust after the energy runs out. And as you can see, Nug is being pushed a lot more actively now, and is not even getting remotely close as he was before. And that is a clean shot dead through the center. Let this be a lesson. You cannot bring deck cannon rammers against TB rails, at least against skilled opponents. It won't work out. So, in a stunning upset, Nismus moves on. But it is still respectful. All players are having fun. And there's GG from both sides, which is nice to see. Hein versus Nick. Hein versus Nick. Up next. Let's see if they're here. I can see Kine in a voice channel on Discord. Is it possible that the game updated? Wasn't announced in announcements. I can see them both in the chat. Oh, Kine joined, so clearly it was functional. Kine. With one of the fastest matches ever. Still stunned with how quickly he tore through too much Aaron's ship. Very impressive. Kinda interesting, kinda interesting. That's 2 upsets. 2 upsets. Where you see, Salofs has been playing pretty actively. However, Slowking and Nug, despite being higher seeds, were not likely practicing as actively or effectively as the people who upset them, those being Mint and Nismus. So, very well done for Mint and Nismus for upsetting some of the scariest players in the tournament. It's the outdated version of Glass Fortress. I have to download the right one. Alright, so Nick is tired apparently. Let's see. Kind decides who bans. People are pinging me. Updating isn't necessary. People have yet to... Kind decides to go first and bans the rail. Currently things are still working out, so updating isn't necessary. I can see the casters, two of them, Polar Bear and that one KMC, who said they'd help me, are currently both chilling on beaches. They're flexing, showing pictures, going on vacation. Unhelpful. Might ban them from the tournament organization server. So Nick, unfortunately, or it appears to have not seen the performance of Kine with the nuke ultralight. First demonstrated by Slowking in one of the previous tournaments. And this is a probably bad arrangement for Nick, because the thing is, with ships that fast, just gonna like be running in circles around the ion chip, which admittedly is pretty fast, but not dumb fast, like Kine's ship is. So this is just gonna be like going sideways, and then it's just gonna like launch nukes, and then run away. Oh, Nick decides to disconnect the armor for sake of higher speed. Now, this is something that I would say is pretty normal. It's typically a pretty good tactic, but the issue is that when you have your opponent going at a casual, of course, breakneck pace of 140 meters a second, they don't care that you can dodge nukes. They're just gonna like shove them down your throat. Like, it doesn't matter how fast you are, because the opponent is faster. And Nick, well, I have to suspect that, like, Nick knows this and decided to break off the armor for aiming purposes. But as you can see here, Pine can just fly in circles around it, and those nukes are spread out pretty well. Gonna be dodged, though. Except for those! Pine launched both sides. Nick, not out of it yet, but still, worse for wear at 65% of his health. Pine did not make sure that he had reloaded, so would have done a killing shot if he had nukes available, but did not, so unfortunately just kind of bounced into his opponent. Throwing nukes all over the place, rams Nick to try and prevent him from dodging these. Nick either lost both connections to his armor or knocked it off for sake of trying to avoid it. Kine's point defense is probably going to be destroying the prisms if given enough time. And see, this is the issue if you take too much damage, is that you can't break the shields. And... yup. Didn't chain, though. Interesting. And Kine does the momentum throwing of the nukes by spinning. So Nick is still alive, and is probably going to be running in circles. Running away, trying to avoid it. And then Kine is going to ram him and kill him with the point defense. Or he's going to fail to dodge the nukes. Kine having so much fun here. Not even like really caring that his opponent is lasing him a little bit, but is just deciding to spin in circles and having a nice time. Nick unfortunately ripped apart before Kine's uncaring gaze, and is now going to be shredded by point defense. Let's see how long it takes for it to target the right part. Point defense is known for not being aimable. Continues to barely dodge the nukes. Unfortunately runs out of energy because there's no supply lines. Let's see if the nukes hit. So, Nick can still vaguely move, and he forfeits. Out of tricks, as he states. So Kine, completely brutalizing another player. I'm kind of surprised that anyone would let him have that ship, given how effective it is. And how effective it has been demonstrating itself. However, it would seem that Nick was not afraid of it, as he should have been. So, Nick eyes who bans first. So Nick can ban first, or Kine can ban first based on Nick's. Nick is unhappy with the pink ship, so I assume he's going to be facing MS. So Kine now bans 2 ships. I assume I don't have to explain it. I shouldn't have to. Missile Orbiter and Rails. So Nick is now stuck with the Iron ship again. Let's see if it's... Nick seems to think that he can do it. Let's see how it goes. I'm not convinced. Kine has demonstrated again and again that this ship is his forte. It's kind of unfortunate we didn't get to see Slowking using his as the person who kind of did it first, but not, apparently, not necessarily the best. So Nick deciding to, again, discard his armor. Not sure about that one, but is... Let's see how his tactics are different this time, if at all. Kine is still probably just gonna, like, do a sideswipe and sling the nukes into him with momentum. Nick trying to ram him. Oof. At least before Nick wasn't stuck on an asteroid. Nick doing nothing to change his tactics to save him from last time. Manages to lose a few launchers, probably through friendly fire, which means that the most damage Nick has done has been actually Kine doing it to himself. Nick not out of it yet, can still supply thrusters and weapons. And forfeits. Kine rips him apart. Did not ban the right ships. And that is it. So one last round. From... Let's see. Game Night versus Lunestro. Right. Oh. Game Night, again, showing up. So somebody... One of my favorite parts of the tournament is people very rapidly making memes. So as you can see from the kind donation of Territron, is Nick running away from Kind's ship. And being unsuccessful, but running away. Trying to, anyway. Let's see if Lunestro is alive. Lunestro said they were sleeping, apparently got 7 hours of sleep over 3 days. Not something I would recommend. But I mean, I can't stop them. Can only disqualify them for not showing up. So Walt continues to not announce the patch, so still not an issue. So it seems as though Game Night is still in the lobby. Yeah, have to update. So the stream might die because software is dumb. But I have to update Cosmoteer. I'm going to show the bracket in the meantime. So let's see. So you just get to see this lovely bracket and nothing else. So update the tournament. Make sure that everyone who joins also updates. Back. Nice. Both players join in record time. Ideally, the players would be watching the event and join this fast every time. Not likely, unfortunately, but we are trying to fix that in the future. Alright, so as you can see from the bracket, it is Game Night that is the higher seed, so Game Night decides who bans first. Orbiter. So Lunestro now bans 2 ships, Ion and so 2 TB rails, mirror match. Love the mirror match. Let's see what occurs. So let's see. Game Night has 8 tractor beams and 2 rails, so he needs the flip to do anything. Lunestro is a much more traditional one, if a bit wide. Very, very wide. Typically, ships don't have this much space in between the rails. Like a full 4 blocks is a lot. So higher firepower, but lower speed, lower tilt ability. The issue is, for Game Night, is that Lunestro can just keep pushing away constantly, and because they're both pushing each other away, it will just maintain distance, and flipping does not work at distance. So, and Game Night is already struggling with power because all those thrusters, like, each half of the ship is an entire reactor. And he is just going to get in a worse and worse position the longer the match goes on because of how much he's struggling to power those. And tractor beams are very power hungry. Lunestro is in the same position. Game Night has not fired a shot yet. Should probably start trying to accumulate chip damage because I can't see it occurring that he actually manages to get a flip. Very nice. Has higher than larger than standard rails. Typically, you don't go to longer rails. You just have a small amount of accelerators. But you get a huge amount of projectile speed and velocity from doing that, even if it's not as damage efficient. So let's see. Lunestro is going to be dealing damage to rails soon. You only have to take out the 2, and then it's just basically done for. Because Lunestro has a lot more firepower and is just digging through the armor. Very small amount of regenerability with 6 entire shields. 6 entire small shields. And Game Night running out of armor. Slowly but surely, I would say that Lunestro is whittling away. And Game Night continues to not be able to do anything to flip Lunestro. Trying desperately, doing a good job to prolong the match, but unfortunately, It's not working out. Lunestro taking another shot. And loses half of his firepower. An entire half. But it doesn't matter if you could get behind him. I don't think it's gonna happen. It's worth noting that all of that armor that Game Knight has is functionally useless because Lunestro can just snipe the specific locations that he needs to. Game Knight forfeits. Understandably. So I suspect that Game Knight is going to... So they seem to be agreeing to do a mirror match. Okay, well, I guess they just want ions. Orbiter. So let's see, does Lunestro ban everything but the ion? So, a display of sportsmanship. I think that Lunestro would have been a better position if Game Knight had left it with the TB rail, but very cool that they are agreeing to a mirror match. Mirror matches are probably the best demonstration of skill because it's the same limitations, how you work with them. So both of these players have disconnectable armor, but they also have a lot of shields. Game Knight has 10 large shields with 20 ions. Lunestro has 6 large shields for smalls with 20 ions. So Lunestro spent most of their budget, the budget difference on armor, as opposed to Game Knight spending it on shields, I would say. They have roughly the same amount of thrusters. Lunestro does have disruptors, but it's going to be very difficult getting those into play. I think Lunestro is aiming to disconnect the armor by cutting off the sides, the corners. So now the Game Knight's left side is cut off, so Lunestro just needs to rotate and destroy the other side. And then it is already in shield territory for Game Knight. However, Lunestro, it seems, is rather focused on trying to breach the side armor, or the armor side. So Game Knight decides that this is not going well, and is going into kite mode, where he can aim his ions, and no longer has armor protecting them. So disruptors are now going to come into play. Game Knight doing not a great job of running away because there was a rock in the way. Lunestro disconnects the hook just in time to not get stuck. Manages to rotate off. That hook was probably going to be somewhat important, but it was more important to not immediately die. So Lunestro, excellent quick time event that they managed to survive. And this is not a good arrangement because those shields are going to go down before Lunestro can get rid of Game Knights. Lunestro, you need to pay attention, and notices it. This is why you add small shields. Small shields are very, very good at keeping your large shields alive, and effectively serves as like the last resort so that you don't lose your large shields. So now, as you can see, it's all back online. Lunestro is ready to fight again, and at close range, so the disruptors are going to come into play. 2 disruptors may seem like a very small amount, but it is beyond enough to stress large shields if they hit consistently. So this seems to be a question of logistics, of course, because Lunestro can just refill the shields pretty easily, but can they do it before Game Knight, or can they do it quickly enough that they can resume battling, and then Game Knight is too busy losing energy to actually survive? So I think that Lunestro would probably want to disconnect armor and start aiming. Just need to rotate, shields are... Oh, lost a large shield, that's very not good. Game Knight managed to be pushed out into the Ring of Death though. I think Lunestro needs to be aiming. Managed to stress 2 of the large shields down. but is gonna have a rough time because Game Knight's gonna continue to just fire at that area and shred it, really. Lunestro continuing to have spinal beams, which means they have to aim their entire ship to aim the ions, as opposed to Game Knight that can rotate them freely. Kinda surprised, because Lunestro is a player known for aiming their ions. That is probably why they're trying to get distance, is so that they can set up their next phase of attack. Game Knight wisely choosing to not let that happen. Is probably in a faster ship, despite being diagonal, which is kind of surprising. Love Game Knight's ship, very unique. Love Luna's ship, I painted it. So this could really go either way. The Lunestro not disconnecting the armor still, but frees their ions to no longer be spinal. I think Game Knight is trying to disconnect the armor, aiming for the explosive charge, which will instantly disconnect it. One of his prisms, when it's not aimed properly, Lunestro still managing to protect the reactor pretty well, drives Game Knight into the ring of death again. Probably? No, Game Knight switches directions quickly enough. And Lunestro has run out of side armor on their right side, which means that they cannot rely on it anymore to stay protected. As you can see, Game Knight could just turn and start firing again at the shields. The Lunestro is in a pretty rough position, and their armor is still there. Might be useful, it might be stuck. No, it's still one ship. Lunestro probably trying to think of a plan to do, because they can probably just continue to stall with their corner and side armor. It's just a matter of coming up with a plan of attack that can actually beat Game Knight here. See, this is ideal. If you have aiming ions, then you can just force your opponent to target the wrong side of shields, while you continue to aim through those shields and be fine. It's something that Game Knight didn't have to do, but is presumably also capable of. It just requires that you have proper logistics set up for your shields, and they need to be coming back up online pretty actively for it to work out. But the right side is fine, so back to the other tilting. Very delicate dance for Lunestro. Game Knight just kind of has to like play keep away and not die, and then wins because of it. Lunestro running out of active shields. Oh my. And Lunestro loses a reactor. Game Knight does an excellent job of playing keep away, making sure to never let Lunestro get a ram or anything, because that would be catastrophic, and it would allow the disruptors to consistently fire. But Lunestro forfeits. So it is 1-1. So we could potentially, in proper tradition, have the last mirror match. So let's see what the players decide. Interesting. So, no last mirror match between missiles. The Combo Supreme will not face the Missile River. Let's see if we'll see the Combo Supreme in combat, though. We haven't thus far for the entire tournament, if I understand it. And Rail. It's our time. We get to see it now. Rail. Lunestro's, I would say, iconic, classic go-to ship. The Scion. The heavily armored, heavily durable ion rammer. I would say that they're well known for it, but that's just because I've seen it a lot. And let's see what this ship is. Mines, as we know. A lot of large shields. That's gonna be annoying to get through for Lunestro. Mines. 8 mines. I don't think that those are necessarily gonna come into play, but also missiles. This is a very strange ship. Very curious one. Very curious to see how effective it is. So let's see. Game Knight wants to be running away in a straight line, and then wants Lunestro to chase him in a straight line. because that way the mines become a problem. And mines, as much of a joke as they can be at times, if you run straight through them, no matter how much armor you have, it's not a sustainable tactic. So let's see if the mines actually get launched. It's kind of difficult to tell, but I'll keep track of them to the best of my abilities. Lunestro is very aware of how catastrophic mines are, so they are making sure to not chase straight after him, and is instead trying to spiral towards him, maybe lead him into an asteroid, ideally. And Game Knight can effectively just choose to get away whenever he needs to, because he can just drop mines and then go full forward thrust. Right now, he's kind of just staying in range and trying to, I would say, bait Lunestro to going straight at him, because he's like, he's right there, just go at him. And then the mines launch, and then you have a problem. So Lunestro is using the side armor very effectively. Is digging through a corner, so that's now a weak point a little bit. This would be a pretty decent time for mines. But Game Knight still waiting for the particularly ideal shot. He's not really aiming the missiles at all, or if he is not aiming them well. Has done no breaching of Lunestro. Lunestro continues to effectively not take damage. The mines completely miss, huge whiff. None of them activate, not even on the sides. So now Lunestro has a few moments free where they can target and not be punished for it because the mines are on cooldown. So Game Knight is probably going to be turning those back on. They're back on, yeah. And launches them again, and this is going to be a bad hit. Fortunately, does not lose a prism, but it would have been possible, and Lunestro is led into a rock, probably panicking about the mines. Unfortunately, Game Knight does not punish. Game Knight does nothing to punish here, and because Lunestro has some amount of rear thrust, it is much easier for them to rotate and get off. Let's look at the ammo storage. So mines are still fine. Missiles are about 1/3 empty. So Game Knight is still very much alive and healthy. And Lunestro is continuing to take damage. I don't think that they can take another 2/3 of what they've taken thus far. Or 3 times is what they've taken thus far, but another catastrophic blow from the mines. All that armor doesn't matter. Shields and prisms are taking damage because it was all shut offline. Small shields are the only thing keeping the defenses alive right now. Lunestro running for their life, trying to get away, knowing how dangerous it was what they just did, and managed to barely survive. Missiles have completely shorn through Lunestro's left side, and is now forced to take bad piloting patterns or flight patterns to avoid it. Those missiles are going to fortunately hit the rock and not hit the side. But Lunestro is probably going to be playing defensively. Chasing after Game Knight is no longer a sustainable strategy. And bleeding out the missiles is going to be their go-to plan, I would say. Fortunately, the disruptors are now free, at least, to get through these 6 shields. However, it depends on how effectively Lunestro can actually do that. And Game Knight is now in a position to put the mines in between him and Lunestro. So continuing to excellently space, a great example of how mines can be absolutely brutal if used effectively. It just requires that they're used effectively. Lunestro continuing to struggle with the rocks, having to maintain whiff from the mines, almost very bad for Lunestro. Lunestro losing thrust and such, has to take wider and wider turns to prevent the missiles from hitting the sides, just like arcing around and hitting the sides. Has lost thrusters from doing that already, but is now aiming their ions. Took them long enough, unfortunately, but is now going to be slowly chipping away at the shield energy, and I presume that it's going to be, the reactor is going to be enough to outcompete that damage, but I could very much be wrong. Mines, again, destroyed the other corner, losing more thrust from Lunestro. It's not over yet, though. Another hit of the asteroid, bouncing off of it, losing control of their ship for a second, trying to deal with the forces at play there, is probably a little bit off balance, is about to hit another asteroid, unfortunately. spins to try and avoid it to some degree. He's continuing to have missiles. Lost a control room. That's what occurred. That's why they were spinning, is the thrusters were auto-firing accordingly. So Lunestro is deciding to try and play a tank or such. Turned off most of their thrusters, some of their ions, small shields. So all they can really do is hope that Game Knight runs out of ammo at this point, but I don't think that's a likely occurrence. And that's a reactor gone. Most of the weapons. Lunestro forfeits. Excellent match. Demonstration of the effectiveness of mines. Game Knight moves on. Lunestro, second place previous tournament. Excellent play, unfortunately, is knocked down. Game Knight moves on. Excellent matches from the both of them. And let's see, it's Mint versus Air now. Air. Let's see if they can join. They might have to update because, you know, they needed to join. I assume they joined. Let's hope so anyway. Neither of them are responding. Worrisome. I can see the Air is online. Is almost him. Kind of embarrassing if they both just don't show up. Going to a different match to let them do whatever it is that they're doing. They're going to Nismus versus Kine. So I guess players are updating, so let's probably take an intermission. I certainly know I need one. Yeah, it's update issues. They were lurking in the lobby trying to join. Could not join because they were wrong version. Now let's see how long it takes them. Oh, let's see who gets here first. They're going to be Nismus and Kine versus or Air and Mint. Air and Mint it is. Okay, so Mint decides to bans. Yes. So Air, Mint is above air in the bracket, but air is the higher seed, so I was messed up. Air decides who bans first. Air gets rid of Crown Viper, the missile orbiter. Kinda shocking. I would be expecting Air to go with Mesothelioma again, since it completely pwns other orbiters. But is fortunately saving us from such an outcome. Now Mint is left with the rail and nuke thrower, flinger. Ultralight nuke. I don't even know what it's called. So rail versus heavily shielded cannon TB wall. So it depends on how effectively Mint's 8 rails, each having 8 accelerators. No, 12 rails, each having 8 accelerators, does against this opponent's ship. And I'm pretty sure that that is enough rails to just cut through these shields. Mint does have to worry about the small ship, so it might finally be relevant. But I suppose if Mint just also, like, slaughters air by cutting through the ship, which Mint's already lining up the shot. So it did not destroy the reactor, but it did manage to break through 4 shields, which is very impressive. And that is already the ship cut in half. Now, the issue is that Mint is about to lose their control rooms. And that is it. So, Mint will decide who bans first. Forgot that I have to give them their ships back. So needy. Yes, to do. So what do you ban, Mint? Fortunately, Mint is choosing to ban the more obnoxious ships. Thank goodness for that. We do not want to do those. That's not... That's a little bit unfortunate for Mint. Let's see if Mint does anything to change the outcome of this match. It's a little bit unfortunate. I think that Mint should have probably banned the orange wall. Because remember, the blue one just has point defense. Has no proper weapons. So even if Mint gets, like, thrown about, it's not the biggest of issues. So, I'm not sure what one would even do here for Mint. Because, as shown, you can only break through 4 shields in the first volley. So unless air approaches an angle, which would be extremely dumb, I don't think it's going to be an issue. Uses the small ship in front as a shield. The nukes are launched when the ship is moving too fast for them, unfortunately, to be useful. Mint probably wants to set the rails to fire at will, because they're all there, but you won't be able to get... Yeah, there you go. You won't get the chance to fan them. Fortunately, I don't think the rails are going to be capable of dealing significant enough damage while they're unaimed to be problematic. But it is damaging, at the very least. but it's a little bit saddening to watch. There's not much the Mint can do here, and after the 4th shot, they are going to no longer have any functionality. There's not enough crew to like reload the ship, not remotely, and I don't think the reactor is even capable of supporting it. So I think that will be air moving on. So air is our first finalist. So nicely done, air. Will be part of a round robin with the other 2 finalists. Okay, there. So they should be joining. So I think that the lesson that most players are going to be learning is that you have a weak option in your setup. You will be forced to use it, at least with the current ban system. Which is kind of an issue. Because if you cannot build 3 decent ships, then, or if you do not pick 3 all-rounders and you have a very specialized ship, such as Mints, will be forced to use it at great expense to yourself. Or if you at least do not have a ship that actually counters on the opponent's side. So important to note is to have all-rounders, and to make sure that if you have a specialized ship, that it will counter a wide variety of things, so that it's not targeted by ships that are not countered by its specialization. So let's see. Nismus is 15, Kine is 6. So Kine is the higher seed at 6, and Nismus is 15, so Kine decides who bans first. I'm scared of the missile orbiter, as is everyone else. I don't think Nismus has even used that missile orbiter. So let's see. I think Nismus may end up doing the same matchup as Too Much Aaron with the Avoider versus the Ton. I must be tired. Deck cannon. Oh, orbital walls, counter avoiders. Nismus. Oh. Oh well. Fine. Yeah, there we go. That was kind of expected after Nismus didn't ban the wall. So we haven't seen this orbital wall previously. It's pretty standard. Has no flak. Flak is a recent addition. Lots of armor to prevent the explosive charges from being detonated accidentally. Not very much defenses. It does have, of course, a lot of shields and the sufficient front armor. So Nismus will have struggles trying to break through it, and does not have sufficient disruptors, I would say, which is what you want for this match. So this is a very difficult matchup that is possible to win, but unlikely. Nismus has to depend on Kine doing exactly that, getting stuck on the rock. And if Kine doesn't get stuck on the rock, then he will just be in a position to continue firing at Nismus and ripping through his ship. Because Kine's ship has invested in firepower, where Nismus invested in maneuverability. And Kine, being able to leverage that firepower unconditionally makes it so that the ship is just a numbers game, and Kine wins that game. So you have to involve technicalities of rocks. And if you can get your opponent stuck on a rock, suddenly your chances are slightly better, equal, whatever. However, it it seems as though it's not likely to occur. Kine is doing an excellent job in preventing that from happening by carrying Nismus away from the rocks, despite the fact that Nismus wants to get to the rocks. Nismus likely should have been backing up to give as much time as possible and to give as many options for Kine to just completely screw up as possible. Ideally, you are... Let's see if this catches. Oh! So Kine is stuck. Kine splits to do this. Nismus does have control of his ship, so it depends on how quickly he can punish Kine for his transgressions. Is struggling to control his ship. Kine is not paying much attention. Does not split the second ship off because this is dead ship. He needs to abandon it immediately. Yeah, there you go. And needs to get this out of the way. Nismus has roughly equaled it now. This is exactly what I was talking about. The issue is that Kine... that ship is now probably going to be stuck. Oof. So it's roughly a third of a ship versus 2/3 of a ship. Unless Kine can manage to get that free. If Kine manages to ram with this ship and get in the center, then he wins. But getting that ram is kind of difficult, and it's on a limited time frame. Kine very much struggling with piloting the third ships. Might have been focused trying to get this free, but I think that's going to be it. Kine is as stuck as you can possibly get. Unfortunately, Nismus is going to not be able to get around the asteroid to fire at the other ship, I would say. Unless Kine continues to have struggles. Sliding off. Bounces, catches. Now it could jockey to the right using its vector thrust. And Kine gets too impatient. It's kind of easy to do that when you have the guy behind you. And Kine gets stuck on the rock. So, good job for Nismus turning it around. I shouldn't have doubted. I shouldn't have doubted. Nismus had it completely under control. 100% planned by Nismus. So Kine, having lost, now decides who bans first. And the missile orbiter. Again, with the fear of the missile orbiter. I think that Nismus might have been going on a rampage or something outside of the tournament lobbies. Because remember, players practice against one another with their ships before the tournament. So Nismus might have made a name for himself. Same match. Kine technically has the advantage, but as we just saw, rocks make all the difference. Let us see how this plays out. Nismus only has to win one more time. So Nismus, I would say, wants to just hug the rocks, stay as close as possible to the rocks. In fact, I would be backing up and going over here, because this is 2 rocks, and 2 rocks is more rocks than 1 rocks. It's also, since you're backing up, it's further away from Kine. Because if you, like, try to go over here, for example, Kine would just intercept you. So yeah, this is the avoider death loop, or such. And Kine has to either respect it, or has to take a huge risk and get really close. So now Nismus can just switch directions. And as you can see, Nismus took effectively no damage from that. He didn't lose any parts, he did take chip damage. Whereas if you look at Kine's front, he lost an entire cannon section, and a disruptor and a blaster. And that is pretty bad, and this could also blow up and cause more damage. As well as this being heavily damaged, these 3 parts. So that is exactly what Kine wants, is to instill panic and fear in Kine, to make it so he doesn't control his ship as masterfully as is necessary. So Kine, unfortunately, choosing not to go for the ram. Nismus still retaining most of his HP here. and is firing from the side. This is ideal for Nismus, where he wants to be firing constantly, and then Kine is too busy dealing with the rock, or fearing the rock, to actually fire back. Now Nismus can switch directions again. Kine may need to choose to ram here. May not have a choice. So he slides off. He's going to take a little bit of thruster damage. Going to take more damage on his weapons. Loses a shield. Losing thrusters. It may be prudent of Kine to disconnect his ships, go for flanking, because clearly this is not working currently. If you lose too much damage, or if you can't confirm that your burst damage is landing, then the shields regenerating is hugely problematic, because they just come back. The shields just turn back on. I might lose that ship to being stuck, but this ship might get the central reactor. Second ship is fine. So let's see how well Kine can deal with this, how well Nismus can deal with this. So ideally you want Nismus to be panicking and spinning because there's a ship ramming you, and then the other one flanks. Unfortunately, the other one is busy with a rock. However, this is ideal. Because it is a lot more difficult to manage 2 very fast ships than it is 1 very fast ship, even if 1 very fast ship is more dangerous. So now Nismus is in a situation, is in quite the pickle, where the reactor is probably going to be fired upon, and if he is not careful, ends up with a bunch of cannons behind him. So he wants to get his back to an asteroid as quickly as possible. And has been doing an excellent job of spacing and making sure that the opponent is not behind him. Very nicely done on Nismus's part. And Kine's 2 ships are sandwiched together. There is no way to get out of that, having been there. It is not reasonably possible. It's even worse than being stuck on an asteroid because they're so in each other's way. So Kine says GG, likely forfeiting. Nismus might lose a reactor here. Should probably be behind this one to destroy it. Kine is not out of it yet. Is out of cannon ammo though. But, you know, Nismus explosions. Nismus likely didn't realize, so now it's a pair of ships. And if Nismus cannot adapt to this quickly enough, has a huge problem. So Kine is completely out of energy. Something that is common with these ships is that they run very, very loosely with their energy, which is why they use cannons, is because cannons don't require energy. So Nismus is trying to get away and is trying to pressure, I would say, so that the shields don't come back online. The other 2, this ship has no weapons, so it's not functional. He's trying to save this half, Nismus is, because he is at risk of losing it here. Is slowly taking more and more damage. It's not the worst thing. Nismus decides to focus on killing the parts that's stuck, which only has 4 weapons anyhow. So Kine is down to 1/3, Nismus still has 2/3. Let's see, this ship is running very low on weapons. Unfortunately, Kine's shields are being active enough that Nismus is having trouble breaking them. But, you know, Kine continues to have power struggles, and Nismus's compatriot is going to be coming along shortly. It's worth noting that when you have multiple ships like this, taking rod damage is especially bad, because you are trading less health for less health, or less health for more health. Because Nismus is only losing half of his health being rotted away, Kine is losing all of his health being rotted away. So he should probably abandon killing this ship, I would say, personally. But only 1 blaster. That ship is still alive, so Nismus should like assign RTS controls to give it back, to send it back to the playfield. Turn around, buddy. There you go. So this ship is fresh. Kine did manage to reload, and being able to ram arguably sets you in a better position, but it's a little bit of a health matchup because the blasters are all just like hitting each other at point blank range. So let's see, it's very difficult to stress the shields. I would say that you want to be firing at weapons because getting through all of that armor in front of the reactors and such is a very difficult process, especially when destroying weapons makes it so that your opponent can't fight back as well. So I assume that's what Kine is doing. Nismus sent the other ship back into the ring of death. Very well done. Nismus is now flying out of it with his other ship. And as you can see, Kine is at half health with this. This is at full health, effectively, with Ring. This is even worse than half health. Took a very long time to get back. Actually has no weapons. Kine cut that off. So this ship is just kind of scary looking, but doesn't do anything. It could be assigned to push that ship out. Kine is regenerating energy, I would say. Is very low on a lot of health. Also has more shields, but has more exposure because more of his armor has been worn away. Whereas Nismus is effectively not going to lose the reactor. Anytime soon, anyway. Nismus trying to get his other ship in the way to potentially catch Kine. Or get Kine's ship caught on it. Nismus is not paying attention to the right ship. Is struggling to break through the 4 shields with the 2 disruptors. Attacking from behind typically doesn't do anything, but because of how heavily rotted Kine's ship is, it can potentially just destroy the control room if the few lucky shots necessary get it. Disruptors continue to wreak havoc with the energy supply. Fortunately, in a certain sense, Kine had some of his thrusters destroyed, which is arguably a good thing, because it means there's more energy to devote to weapons and shielding, so that is a upside at least. Nismus still continuing to strafe and try and stay away from Kine. Both players not really doing damage to each other effectively. Kine trying to leverage his thrust, but doesn't have any hooks, and Nismus's outside surface is very smooth to prevent that. So Kine just kind of like bouncing off of Nismus repeatedly. Nismus's center ship probably would assign it to rotate towards Kine, just so the shields prevent it from taking undue damage. More damage on Kine, that's very bad. It's not over yet. Kine could get like a ram from this direction and then get the reactor, and then has all the opportunity to be ramming this ship with its no weapons. Nismus finally getting the other ship involved. Kine should hopefully recognize that it's completely not a threat at all, and should rightfully continue to ignore it. It's worth noting, if you have enough time to do so, that firing at the disruptors is more ideal because those both destroy the weapon and cut off supply lines to the blasters. So instead of just like targeting the blasters, you would ideally want to be targeting the disruptors. Kine seems to have lost a important crew room or such because the blaster crew have all left, which is not ideal, obviously. Whereas Nismus is still completely fine. Effectively, it's 2 disruptors and 2 blasters versus 5 disruptors and 5 blasters and 2 disruptors. And he manages to get it. Nicely done. So, Kine lost. I lost twice. That was the second match. So, that will be Nismus. Moving on. It is Salofs versus Game Night next, as the final round before we have our last finalists. Fantastic show. Thank you for participating. Salofs. Let's see if they join in a reasonable time frame. Hello? Where are you guys? I can see you in the lobby. There we go. Let's see if Salofs tangles with the mines once more. It would be lovely to see the mines in use. I doubt it's going to occur, though. I don't think that we've seen Salofs' Dawnseeker at all during this tournament. Salofs is, of course, going first and bans the rail. Game Night, not too fond of that. Neither fond of the idea of facing other TB rails. So Salofs finally gets to use the Dawnseeker. Salofs was apparently not watching, because he's in the exact same position that Lunestro is now in. So Salofs Fico, that is Salofs' faction or such that his ships belong to, I would say. And Game Night, okay, since they're doing whatever, an interesting note about Game Night ships is this red paint. Now, normally when a part has no power, no crew, or no ammo, it gives you a red symbol, which if you zoom out, is very similar to what this looks like. So this is an actual combat tactic of utilizing that red paint to give the impression that you don't have any weapons. Now, it is worth noting that it is completely inaccurate because you cannot see that symbol if it's not your ship. But despite that, the tactic is still effective because the symbol still means what it means regardless, even if it's just red paint. So in the past, I have been actually caught by that because I assumed that nuke launchers were not full. But while in fact they were. So I see that the reason Salofs picks this ship is because it actually has point defense, which is going to significantly increase its longevity. That's the word. And is presumably going to utilize stall tactics because of how you can't get through the shields and you can't chase. So this might be a slower match. Game Night is probably going to be trying to target the point defense. At least I would be, to try and make it so that my opponent is not capable of stalling forever. So that's a pretty bad position to be in, where you're stuck and the missiles are just going to be continuing to hit your rear sides. Game Night decides to just go away though instead of punishing it. Let's see. Oh, that's pretty good lasing. Unfortunately, not functional, doesn't do much. Okay, so Game Night. If Game Night's not moving, Salofs can also not move. And if Salofs not moving, then the mines can't hit him, but he can still aim the ion at Game Night, which could potentially break the shields. So if Game Night is sitting still, then Salofs actually has an option to shoot at him unhindered. Though it's, you know, it wasn't taken advantage of when the first time it was presented. Missiles continue to wear away at Salofs, has an entire extra percentage point of health lost. Not super relevant, but it's not much relevant is happening. So Salofs can use momentum and rotate his ship and potentially laze the missiles. Game Night is going to be switching directions, and because of how close he is, if he just launches the mines, they would likely hurt Salofs here. So Salofs, recognizing this, breaks off and does a full rotation trying to get away from it, recognizing his potential mistake. So see, this is what I mean. Salofs didn't need to move forward here, and because he does, now he has to break off, otherwise the mines are going to hurt him. Game Night is forced into the Ring of Death, so there is damage being dealt here. Less to Salofs, but some. Salofs appears to have lost all of his rear armor, which is relevant. He could be taking thruster damage over time, and then eventually reactor damage. Or lose a prism, and then that just changed to the rest. Salofs doing an excellent job of spacing. I think his ship is a little bit faster, so is going to be continue jockeying Game Night to stay out of the way. Mines do not arm fast enough, unfortunately. Mines do have an arming time in which they are completely non-lethal. They do no damage until they arm. However, they do pass through shields, so if he had been just a little bit farther away, mines that pass through his shields would have activated in front of them and done catastrophic damage, which is rare but exceedingly funny to see. Salofs drifting, sickly drifting past the mines, narrowly avoids ramming into all of them, takes a little bit of side damage, scuffs the paint a little bit. So Game Night almost got lucky there. And really, it's like, Game Night isn't struggling at all here. Salofs is running out of time, but Game Night can just, like, continue to engineer those situations where mines are just dumped in front of Salofs and he has to, like, panic to get out of the way. Game Night, in fact, is so confident that he's approaching head first with the unprotected missiles. So there we go. Salofs isn't moving as aggressively as he could be here, but now has to break off. Worth noting that the mines do last for some amount of time after they've been launched. So Salofs might not be aware of that, and there's more mines. It does destroy the point defense. The point defense on his left side is mostly gone, so that is a vulnerability. The shields are still active. Salofs taking advantage of the fact that the mines were inactive for a little bit. Loses a few thrusters for his trouble. Thrusters function as a form of armor, so to lose them is a bad sign. Oh, gonna be a good sign regardless, but, you know, whatever. Tries to continue to employ his right side of point defense as much as possible. His entire bottom left section of his ship is just completely vulnerable, and if you face that towards your opponent who is using missiles, then you're gonna suffer for it. So Salofs still has missiles coming in from behind. No longer has any armor protecting the prism, or any defenses protecting the prism, so an unlucky... Oh, well. Salofs got caught once, and was punished dearly for it. Salofs failing to recognize that he is actually, in fact, dead, is functionally a person who had a cannonball blown through them, and is bleeding out. But is still moving, because they don't recognize that they're dead. So, let's see how long Salofs continues to spasm. Because, really, that's what this is. Takes more mines! Game Night won to rub salt in the wound, kills Salofs with mines again, really driving home the mistake he made. So, Salofs, the #1 seed, is taken down by mines, of all things. There's still one more match. Game Night saying almost word for word what I did. Where there was a very similar match of a heavily armored ion rammer versus his mine and missile kite. And Lunestro was completely slaughtered. And this is typically why you want to pay attention to tournaments, is because you get to see your opponents in action and learn from them. So it's kind of interesting. Tournament participation is a skill in and of itself, as opposed to just being good at Cosmoteer. You have to be good at tournaments as well. So Game Night may effectively be better at tournaments than Salofs, even if Salofs may be roughly better at the game of Cosmoteer. So Game Night likely going to be forcing Salofs to pick the Dawnseeker again. I would say that it is a rough matchup for any of these ships. Salofs might not have a choice but to go back into the Combo Supreme again. Rail and Ion. Yup. Salofs confident that he can win this, not sure why, but here we go again. So let's see, what is Salofs' tactics? I would say the Salofs would ideally be running away at all times, because very clearly Game Knight cannot be caught, cannot be reasonably caught or damaged, because the entire duration of last match, Game Knight took like 2% in health. It didn't matter. Like, all of the jockeying and moving around the Salofs had no purpose. It didn't do anything to Game Knight. So ideally, Salofs is probably going to be wanting to draw this match, stall it out for the Ring of Death to close, because that's his only way of dealing damage, in my opinion. But of course, Salofs is a different player than myself, and a skilled one at that, so he could continue to beat his head against the wall that is those shields, while having to constantly deal with the mines and the threat of them. More missile shot down. The chip damage already starting for Salofs. Game Knight somehow lost health. A very slight tickle with the ions. That is a rough position. Salofs already takes a huge blow to his side armor, loses point defense. That is a very rough start to this match, I would say. Passes off the rock, loses enough speed that Game Knight's mines are, again, in effect. Salofs has to try and avoid them. Doesn't lose the point defense, at least, this time. Let's highlight those so we can see when they're back on. So they are now armed again. Mines, the launchers rearm very quickly, and it is very easy to continue to just tell your opponent to screw off and just put mines in front of them, and they have to respect it or they die. And because they spend so much time avoiding the mines or avoiding the threat of mines, essentially makes it so that you have infinite reload time, or have no reload time on the mines, and you can just instantly launch them again. Even if you completely miss the mines, like launch them in the wrong direction, the opponent still has to break off in the threat of them because they do so much damage. This is a good position for the mines. Salofs, who manages to miss them. This is one of the best engagements the Salofs has had this entire time. But the mines are going to be active. And it does catastrophic damage to the armor. There is no more front armor. However, Game Knight is going to be taking actual damage here. Until the mines turn back on. And they activated behind the shields! And that is it. We have our finalists. Game Knight, Game Knight, Air, and Nismus. I don't think anyone was expecting this trio of players. However, we are in for a treat. So, first off, we have Air versus Nismus. So, this is a round robin, and we'll see what occurs. It is also a best of 5 setup. So there's 15 to 9 matches left, I would say. Let's hope that we don't get a deadlock where each player wins once and loses once, because that would be really dumb. So ideally, please have one of these players sweep 2 wins. Be really nice of you. Or, of course, we can go into and just count the tallies of how many matches were actually won and lost, how close they were. Air, I mean, if Air doesn't show up, that also just makes it easy. Kind of dumb, but... Air, nowhere in the lobby, nowhere to be seen. Fashionably not there. So kind of interesting. It wasn't underdogs. I think Nismus is the only underdog with a seed of 15 out of 24. Yeah, 15 out of 24. So pretty low in the bracket. However, Game Night and Air were both very high seeds, 4 and 5. They weren't tournament winners, but they're clearly proving that they want to be. So the top 3 seeds were knocked out. So now we have 4, 5, and 15. Very exciting. Nismus is 15, and Air is 4? Air is 5. So technically, Air is presumably going to win here. However, of course, it depends on how it plays out. Okay, so Air is the higher seed. Air decides first. So I will share the bracket, probably one of the few last times. So Game Night, Air, and Nismus are the very last 3 out of 24 players. So excellently done by them. Air also bans the Missile Orbiter. Shocking development, right? Truly. So Nismus now has 2 bans. I would say ban Neuralgia and Territoma, and then you just have like the weird PD ship versus something with a huge amount of disruptors. I don't know, it seems... I'm not too sure about these 2 ships of Airs. They're very strange. I think since Air has 3 tractor beam ships for the next tournament, there is going to be consideration of tractor beams as a weapon, despite the fact that they deal no damage because of how prevalent they are. Now, Air bans one of the last 2. Land Raider. Tractor Beam Railfan versus Tractor Beam Cannon. Strange Tractor Beam Cannon. So, issue is here is the Air can't flip the Tractor Beam ship, and Game Night, in a much, much better platform for doing so, also failed to do that. I don't think it was against Nismus, but Nismus is still proving how effective they've been. So I can't wait to watch this ship get slaughtered again because Air clearly doesn't have experience using it and it gets killed like the first thing in every match. You have to not send it by itself, buddy. If you send it by itself, it's just gonna get focused and killed. Like, I feel bad for the crew on this thing because, like, okay, guys, I guess we're just screwed again. Captain sent us on a suicide mission, and there it goes. Manages to avoid the rails, but it's not long for this world. The low velocity of Nismus's rails are giving it issue at hitting it at far range, but you know, close range works too. So as we can see, Air is much, much lighter. So Nismus just doesn't care about the tractor beams. In fact, Air is helping Nismus because it just pushes him back away. So Nismus is just gonna probably stress the shields and then break them, and then the match is likely gonna be over. Let's see what Air tries to do here. As you can see, can get nowhere near close enough though. Might even get flipped. Loses a reactor already. Oof. Ouch. Air, assuming that they lose this match, probably a safe assumption. Getting flipped. The funny thing is that, like, despite the fact that tractor beams being set in a wide array like that helps you, it also helps your opponent because you essentially gave them a huge set of handlebars. And Nismus doesn't even need to flip. They're doing it probably for fun. But like, as you can see on this far left side, they can just go through the shields. It's not a problem. It's worth noting that these railguns have a huge amount of firepower, and though Nismus' ship is slower, it doesn't really matter because you can just overcome opponent defenses. Air is managing to hold the rails back for the time being, catching them on the center. So it'll depend on Nismus getting a better shot, like that one. So Air, similar to Salofs, is a walking dead man, but doesn't yet recognize it, and I hope doesn't stall this entire match, because that would be kind of an interesting move. I said Nismus' ship wasn't fast, I was lying. I was just dead wrong. It's just that Nismus has never gone fast. That's in range. So, like the small ship before it, air was removed. So let's see what tactics they utilize this time. Air, of course, lost, so Air decides who bans first. This is a best of 5. Not a best of 3, so each individual player has to win 3 times. So Nismus will be banning first. Nismus finds this very amusing. Air actually switching it up. The first time Air banned first, so now Nismus gets to ban second. Nismus taking his Nismus really considering his options. Makes sense. He's in the finals. It is a very scary place to be in the finals. Might not be here. Be unfortunate. I'm not sure why Nismus would take so long to decide, because ideally just like get rid of the missile orbiter, and like both of these are pretty easy to win against with both ships. Maybe not the avoider, but I don't know. What are you thinking? I would have I would have picked very similar ships, which would negate the whole point of like banning, since it's basically the same matchup regardless. Mm. Mm-hmm. 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 I don't want to do it, but it is possible that we can just disqualify players for disappearing. Alright, there we go. He's still there, but the whole implementation of this system was for the sake of saving on time, so you didn't get stuck in counter pick loop. There we go. And rocket. No rocket for air. Technically, missiles are not rockets, because rockets are unguided. Well, I mean, the R-O-K-E-T is different from rockets. I wouldn't know. You're fine. I'm joking. The rail. And Soul Orbiter or Avoider. So, if air bans the missile Orbiter, then say Nismus faces the point defense ship. If air bans the Avoider, then Nismus bans the PD ship. That's how it's gonna work out. Because the TB in combination with the cannons can be very scary. So in point defense, well, that actually has two very small rails. I forgot about that. They were not useful when they were used, so I don't know, it's kind of strange. Nismus more scared of the rails than the cannons. Let's see how this goes. Even Air is kind of surprised at the outcome of Nismus banning Helioma. Air having trouble connecting or such. Can't wait to see this tiny ship die again. It's gonna be like the favorite of the tourney. Completely forgotten because it was unused. Let's appreciate its sandy tones for one of the few last times, because we certainly know it's gonna be killed. In fact, Nismus's Land Raider is one of the best ships equipped to deal with it because they can just like launch so much firepower at it. Who knows? I shall miss it when it's gone though. Unlike all forward thrust ships, the Land Raider and Avoider can also just back up and re-choose different targets. It's kind of very useful. Like, Avoiders are one of the best options to fight swarms, since you can just, like, kite and target them all individually instead of ever getting surrounded, because the maneuverability is actually very, very useful there, but it doesn't come up often because swarms are not prevalent, as Avoiders are also not super prevalent. So Nismus is going to be wanting to hide behind the rock again, of course, because it will prevent the tractor beams from getting a good lock on. Air misjudged which direction Nismus was going and again sacrificed the drone ship. And there it goes. So now it's the proper matchup of air with 6% health loss, maybe just 5%, but regardless. So let's see how effective those tractor beams are at actually flipping. Currently they're trying to drag Nismus closer so it can be pushed into a spin. However, Nismus is going to be resisting that, I would say, pretty effectively. Getting stuck on a rock is not ideal though. Because now air can apply a spin. The one nuke does pretty decent damage. Nismus has a fire in the control room. Let's hope that gets put out. Oh, that's a crew quarters, never mind. And the issue now is that blasters and disruptors have very low burst, and burst is necessary to get through shields. So, functionally, I would say that Nismus is just going to be stalling to hope that air runs out of ammo. And given that he has factories, that's not likely to occur. Nismus is also not doing as good a job as I thought would be possible to resist the pushes. In times like this, you want to assign like an RTS command so that your ship automatically resists the pushing and pulling, and then tell your ship to like attack from out of range. That way, your ship is constantly backing up while also maintaining a distance, trying to maintain the proper direction and distance. So, Nismus is going to be losing a reactor to fires, as well as a control room, which makes it so that he cannot resist the tractor beams, and also loses control for a pretty large amount of time. So, Air seems to have picked the right ship here. Nismus desperately trying to turn things off, and is going to lose the control room and dies. Nismus, for all his consideration, did not consider properly. So, one win for both. So hopefully Air will know to, Nismus will know to avoid kicking the avoider into neuralgia. However, Air can force Nismus to use Land Raider, and that still might lose to mesothelioma. Hmm. You know, I should probably prepare like a list of jokes. Random bad jokes to say in times like this. I have a few memorized. I heard there was a restaurant on the moon. The food was great, but I've heard that there's no atmosphere. So Nismus is again forced to pick the Land Raider. No choice. And neuralgia. So it's somewhat the same matchup, except it is instead point defense, which is useless, and 2 rails. And I wonder how effective those 2 rails are going to be. Let's hope that Nismus manages to stay farther away this time. 4 rails, not 2. The lowest firepower ships that I've ever seen in a tournament, much less one that's actually been successful. It's kind of ludicrous, to say the least. At least Nismus isn't using missiles this time. And at least Air isn't throwing more ships to be slaughtered this time. Nismus trying to do the traditional spin around the asteroid. Trying to bait Air into it. Air is going to be pro running away. Okay. Probably have the advantage here if you get the rails off, but I can run away. Option D. You only delay the inevitable, though. Whatever it may be. Okay, so they're just gonna be waiting. Sure, but alright, so I have another funny image that I'm now going to share. Because who cares what these two are doing? They're doing nonsense. Oh, are they doing something? Let's see. They were just sitting there, so I have to like share something. I have to do something. Okay, so this is what Nick for us. Where Air's ship, as you can see, is just being fed into the meat grinder that is its opponents. Where they just completely steamroll it. I think that image was too forgiving. Because effectively it's throwing water balloons into a volcano for all the effect of it had. Because you see, at least this tiny ship, or effectively the bus in this analogy, is going to be like slightly scuffing the paint of the train. But it didn't even do that. We're throwing salt at like all people. Like handful of salts against their legs and hoping it would deal damage. It wasn't worth it. Guess I could look up puns. I stopped watching the stream now. Wants to hear puns though, which is I like them. I'm pretty sure most people don't like them. I like Nismus's paint. Let's inspect that. Very nice red with a green and uses all 4 colors as opposed to most participants. Actually engaging, shocking display. Exciting. Nope, I was wrong. Air decides to run away again, as is their right. It's a very nice off blue, this color. Very fond of it. However, I have to rate this paint very lowly because it has only 1 color. And that's just a saddening amount of colors when you can have up to 4. Nismus has infinitely more points, even if it's just patterns. Finally we're getting somewhere. Alright, so those blasters are very difficult, have a very difficult time breaking through shields. Because the shields are very high health and blasters are, you know, it's kind of like ions, but not as bad. Because they're about dealing sustained damage, and shields are about taking sustained damage. So trying to get the disruptors to track properly can be very difficult, especially when Air is doing a pretty good job of balancing all of the incoming damage. Oh. It's not careful, could lose the control room. Now Nismus is maintaining distance properly. Doing this the right way, I would say. And I'm pretty sure that this ship has significantly less thrust. Like, it only has 4 banks as opposed to the, like, 7 before, so it cannot leverage its tractor beams nearly as well. I was expecting that it would get, like, flips of the same effectiveness off as the other ship did, Neuralgia, but unfortunately, because it has so few thrusters, it cannot do it to the same degree. And that is all of the shields down. So that is one lost shield. Cut supply line right there, so that thruster's gonna be turning off too. And air flips back around, is now presenting the weakened section again. And is split. Now, this presents an interesting problem. No, it doesn't, because these ships can only spin. They can't flank at all. Unless Nismus decides to do, like, show his back to this one, I think that's gonna be it. Because air cannot get behind him, and the tractor beams are useless. So this is a pretty good demonstration why you need to have weapons. And if you use tractor beams instead of weapons, you need to have thrust to support the tractor beams. Air kind of went all in on countering missiles, and very clearly, that doesn't mean you have anything to work with when you're not fighting missiles. So game night at 2 wins, air at 2 losses. A quote from the last tournament, from Nick. Good job for every single one of you who finished school, graduated in college, found your one true love, raised your child, made a good family, and lived the rest of your days in the best way possible. Before that match with air ended. Oh. Well, I guess we're gonna take longer. This is my fault for not giving them the ships back. Very nice ship of the day. Submissions. I like watching the pretty ships that people build. You don't see the prettiest ships here because, you know, it's about winning. Competitive. But the aesthetic ships are delightful. Always delightful. I'm always very fond of seeing the things that people put together. They're barely paying attention, it would seem. Fans first. So Air has 2 bans. I can't imagine what Air's gonna do. Because if he bans... Okay, Air cannot... Oof. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Is like, if your one goal is the missile orbiter, then you may as well ban the... whatever. But then Air's... Nismus is just gonna ban the PD wall. What's a cannon wall gonna do against a missile orbiter? Yep. Alright, the first time we've seen this, I think, it is tractor beam missiles. Interesting. Lovely paint. This is one of the best paints in the tournament. Actually has colors. I don't know who this is, but I imagine it's a character that somebody's going to tell me about. Those might be apples with butterflies. Apples or butterflies. Apples and butterflies. I don't know. Can't wait to see this ship die again. I'm gonna like be crying if I get to it. I have to watch it after this. So Nismus not using the tractor beams to push air away as one would probably be doing. There we go. Missile struggling to hit such a small target, but whoa, it's going far away. It is out of there. That's kind of the funny thing about tractor beams is that against smaller ships, you can just like say go away, and then they have to because you push them away. So I think Nismus would ideally just have like one tractor beam assigned to push it away, and then just set the missiles to fire at Neuralgia. Because unfortunately, missiles fired at this thing are just going to be wasted. It's going to fly in from the beams. There it goes. Air shape makes it pretty adept at blocking missiles with the shields, because if it has very little sideways room to hit. Issue is, I think that both of these players might run out of ammo before they run out of anything else. Before they run out of life. There we go. More damage is occurring. Cannon ship actually managed to get behind. It's just going to die to missiles, but it did. And there it goes. So air can continue trying to use that, but is functionally dead. Functionally pointless. Nesmus continue to fling air away, being the lighter opponent. It's worth noting that tractor beams do block each other. It was a semi-recent addition to the game alongside deck cannons. And its roof turrets block each other, so if Nismus is sideways like this, the tractor beams lose effectiveness. Not that it'll likely come up because the ship doesn't depend on flipping to win, but it is something to be aware of. A lot of missiles coming in from all manner of places. They're doing a good job of spreading damage, unfortunately, so the shields will continue to stay strong, and Nismus does not have enough missiles to sufficiently stress all of the shields at once. Unfortunately, air's connection is also a little bit iffy, so it may be a while. This is certainly one of the finals ever. One of the few times where I've wanted missiles to be buffed, because then they would be capable of actually hitting the ship. You know, this... I'm even more confused the air would pick a PD wall when this ship is so clearly effective against missiles. Like, to what end do you have a missile counter when you already have a missile counter? Like, I understand it's a more specialized, specifically missile counter, but it's redundant. This is very clearly already doing the job. Actual damage. Oh, I was just gonna run away again. I think Nismus might have more luck pulling instead of pushing. Because, like, as scary as air is with attractor beams, if you pull, it's probably going to be more disruptive to their movement. I don't know. I don't use tractor beams a lot. I'm just hoping this match ends. Ideal. Let's see, how much ammunition does air have? Most of it, alright. So has lights on their ship. More strange things. Nismus is running out of ammo. So it's gonna be left in a... Is air gonna get stuck on the rock? It'd certainly be a fitting demise. Oh, actual cannon fire. Nice. So air playing more aggressively seems to have come at the cost of their evasive patterns, which makes it so that they can have taken some amount of damage. Losing large shields, that's impressive. Now air's stuck on the rock. Not doing much to get out of it either. Air's stuck again. Lose the control room, question mark? Might lose the other one. Both on low health, but no control room loss. Yet. There we go. Air is completely fine. Losing the control room was not a problem. Seems to have lost sufficient thrust that air is no longer capable of really controlling their ship. Which, you know, might be a problem. So chip damage over time, very successful. I mean, it is what missiles are about, is just completely wearing your entire opponent away until there's nothing left. Lost a control room, lost reactor. Only one control room left. All the shots are arcing. Air's turning, he's gonna put it directly in the line of fire. Barely alive. Fortunately, all those missiles will bounce off of shields. Nismus manages to get stuck on the rock, surprising. Air is going to the void, though. 65 crew are missing from the ship. And it gets the control room. Nismus wins against air. So now is game night. Game night. Up. Okay, let's see. It is 4. Okay, so we've seen air. We've seen far too much of air and his ship. That's what I meant, his ship. Love this ship. Very unique. One of the only diagonal in the second half of this tournament, as far as I'm aware. Air might not be paying attention. There they go. Get to see this tiny ship disconnected again. And game night, the funny thing about these ships is that they have very good rotation because they're diagonal. So I suspect that the tractor beams are going to be largely pointless. Game night needs to properly kill the tiny ship because it can actually be a problem for once. Game night is probably retaining the armor for that exact reason. Night ramping up, might have been busy responding to a message. Amusingly, that's a problem. Come on, little buddy, you can be useful. No, you can't. Game night disconnecting armor for better ship control could be detrimental because it comes at the cost of weight, which helps you resist tractor beams sometime. It also will let the tiny ship actually be a little bit more functional. Well, I was wrong. So it seems as though Game Night could not do a good enough job staying out of range because Air continues to really bully Game Night with the tractor beams and thrusters. I would say that Game Night probably wanted to face Mesothelioma a lot more with much worse combat prowess. And now I guess you're probably going to get the chance. In a shocking turn of events, the tiny ship actually manages to survive. I decide to bans first again. I think it's safe to say that most of these matches are not going to be making it to the highlight reel. it kind of makes me sad to see Game Night take this opponent. I think that it would be ideal if I think the ideal matchup is this Ion Ship versus Mesothelioma with the rails and point defense, because it can't flip opponents. Game Night in a rare display keeping the side armor but not the front armor. Because Mesothelioma can't flip opponents nearly as effectively, especially when they have this much reverse thrust, and it can't fight back. So Game Night could have just shot at it, but I suppose I shouldn't have too little faith. Because, assuming Game Night plays it carefully, this should be pretty cut and dry, that it can just, like, focus on the reactors and cut through them. Orbiting, however, is a interesting trick. See how it turns out. Missiles are likely not going to be able to break the shields, as the last several matches have demonstrated that if you have enough large shields, missiles can't do anything to them. Especially when you only have 4 missile banks, as the ship does. But it was also the case that they had more than 10 large shields, so I don't know, it might bounce out. However, Game Night slowly, steadily, as is the best way to do things, continues to drill towards air. Air not using the tractor beams at all, one of the more interesting decisions they've made. I would assume that they would be useful, but I would be wrong, I guess. Air over-rotating a little bit to save their corner from taking damage. It's worth considering, I would say, to target the explosive charges as opposed to the reactor. Because if you get rid of the explosive charges, then you functionally deal a lot of damage by disconnecting the armor. So the issue with this strategy of Game Nights is that all these missiles are coming in from the corner and are going to be hurting shields and thrusters. Lost 1 shield already due to that specific thing. So even though it does lower the damage because these 2 prisms on the edge are not focused as well, it does, it is probably a good idea to have a wider rotation so that the shields are better protective of the corners. Game Night continuing to target the reactor. They're turning the tractor beams back on again. Can't tell if they're pushing or pulling. Pushing now. Trying to expose that flank to the missiles again. Loses another shield. Oh, that hurts. That hurts a lot. And these missiles are coming in from the side. Air seems to be manipulating their opponent so that they can't use the shields or armor to tank. Like such. Game Night losing thrust is very bad because it reduces one's ability to move, obviously, and resist tractor beams. So this is going to get worse the longer it goes for Game Night. Unfortunately, the ions are just not capable of digging through that amount of ridiculous armor, and Game Night's explosive charge that he has, for some reason, is then detonated, and he loses another quarter of his ship. Stuck against the asteroid, I think that's gonna be it. Wins from air. 2 losses from Game Night. So Game Night is, again, gets to decide who goes first. Hope that he goes for, I don't know, airbands first. Not sure what Game Night is planning because this is just gonna go the same, but It's likely to end faster than the previous matches have been. Game Knight decides to dispose of the rear armor, which I think makes sense because it wasn't very helpful last time. With this, they should be able to move faster and resist the tractor beams better. Air continually did not use them for some reason, beyond me. There we go. And now Game Knight knows that the tractor beams are in play and is capable of resisting them through staying far away, I would say. The issue is that it is just very difficult to deal damage because you have to constantly be moving in a circle around your opponent, and your opponent can just rotate however they want. Additionally, the tractor beams applying force to the very slowly rotating prisms is going to make it so that they have a lot more issues targeting properly. So, I mean, let's see. Game Knight doing a very good job this time of catching the missiles properly. May have been listening to the stream, may not have been, but this is a definitely good implementation of the tactics that are necessary to be winning. I would say that this spinning, the circle he's flying in is too tight right now. He wants to be as far away as reasonably possible while still firing back, so that the angle of the shields is, maximized, and the effectiveness of the tractor beams is minimized. Because if you're too close, then the tractor beams gain in effectiveness through pushing. But Game Knight continues to do excellent piloting here. Air continues to sit in place and draw circles, I suppose. Game Knight actually cutting through a significant portion of the armor. Air not doing nearly as good a job as they did last time at spreading the damage there. Only cut the connection, I think, between this outermost segment. No, not yet. Almost. Might consider turning one of the outermost shields to face the other way as opposed to inwards for future matchups. Wouldn't be a surprise anyway. Game Knight continuing to struggle with the tractor beams. Almost cut off the segment, in which case he can go for the armor, or go for the explosive charge, which will disconnect the armor. Or can continue trying to get to the rail, but like, the deeper this hole, the harder it is to actually fire at it because of how narrow the gap is. It's like Game Knight needs to be in this position, like specifically relative to the hole, to actually cut through it. So the wider you make the hole, the better off in a position you are because the target is more and more exposed. So it's an interesting balance, and Game Knight seems to be doing pretty well. Unfortunately, he's not doing as much damage because he's been struggling with Air's tactics and such. There we go, there's some consistent damage. Missiles coming in from all over the place. Game Knight might have to disengage to catch all of these on their shields. Or it's just gonna take a lot of damage. Oh, it hurts. Losing thrusters, never a good sign. Air, presumably not anywhere near low on ammo. Oh, this is a good position. You have to go through much fewer layers of armor from this angle, and the explosive charge is not detonated, but it's functionally cut off. Aiming is destroyed. I think Game Knight loses this one as well. Game Knight fighting it out to the bitter end. No more weapons left though. And now it is Game Knight versus Nismus. Let's see, Game Knight bans first. Bans first. Interesting. Giving it over to Nismus. Hello? Oh yeah, Nismus takes long. Nismus, why are you checking Discord? Stop checking Discord. Ugh. Nismus is avoider. That's an interesting dilemma. Remove Funbringer personally, but it's not a fun matchup versus game. He does have large shields, so he's pretty good. It's a matter of taking advantage of asteroids versus that. He's not gonna he's gonna lose if he faces a Funbringer though. So I hope he doesn't do that. There we go. Okay, so Nismus has only 6 disruptors. That is probably not going to be enough to shatter the shields. So it's a problem. I would say you want to cut off this piece right there. And then shoot at the corners of the armor to disconnect them. So it's interesting. Game Knight is waiting. And Nismus understandably wants to draw out the timer, but is fortunately going to be forced into combat if he wants to complete this in a reasonable time frame. So here we are. Nismus is struggling to get away because, of course, Game Knight is very fast, and the shields are holding up pretty well. But it is, of course, difficult to continue to consistently protect your ship with the shields. Because the shields are very scary, or the ions are very scary, and despite all the shields, the ions will burn through it given enough time. So now Air has to turn. Oh, Game Knight has to turn? Nismus has to turn. There we go. All the shields are back up. So this is Game Knight's issue now. He has to manage somehow to focus on one specific area long enough to actually deal damage. Whereas Nismus just has to like spin once and like there's more shields in the way. That's getting pretty low, lasing it repeatedly. However, Nismus also has the same issue, where he has to focus on one specific area and try and cut through it with disruptors, and it's just going to be very problematic trying to do that. Because the 5 shields are very strong, and Game Knight has excellent logistics based on how effectively they've been kept online. So let's see if the disruptors eventually get through it. It's typically, in my experience as somebody who plays in similar mashups, you have to get rid of the armor, otherwise it's too easy to block a majority of shots with it. Or you have to get far enough away, and Game Knight is taking a lot of damage. That's gonna be it. Just one more volley. There we go. Almost. There we go. Game Knight detonates the explosive charge, trying to get away somehow, for some reason. And Game Knight loses the first match. Rocket. Solar rail. Apparently Game Knight was also not watching the previous tournament, because your ship will not flip that ship. Oh, well, that's even worse. Best of luck to you, Game Knight. It's gonna be an issue avoiding getting flipped. Nismus is very quick and can jump right on top of you. So let's see. Game Knight probably shouldn't be charging in because you can convert momentum, your opponent's momentum, using tractor beams, and then flip them. Also doesn't have his ion set to auto fire. Isn't there nothing? Well, if he can kite effectively, this is great. And it's gonna take super long time for those rails to get through the shields. Especially when Game Knight can just rotate and they're protected until they recharge. However, he does need to aim at the front, I would say. Aiming at the corners isn't gonna do much. Suppose he could be accounting for the tractor beams. Getting real close to that ship. Getting close is really bad. Don't get way too close. There we go. That's what I was talking about. This is gonna aim and painful. Painful, painful, painful. Game Knight continuing to let Nismus ban first. No, that's not the right. So Nismus only needs one more win to win the entire tournament. And Game Night needs to have 3 wins in a row to get second place. So Game Night choosing to embrace kiting. The armor was too much of a weight, so he's going to kite. And Nismus needs to recognize this and start backing up immediately. And that's already a large shield loss. That's catastrophic damage. And a second. I think that, well, Game Night really didn't punish because he was stuck on a rock, but Nismus, needs to be very careful here. Nismus is very much on the back foot now, because Game Night's ship is excellent at kiting, and can do it all day, and will do it all day. I faced it. So Nismus is probably going to be drawing this out, hoping that Game Night makes a mistake. Could potentially just take advantage of the armor, like ram this shell, then use it to push Game Night out to the ring. But that's a somewhat advanced tactic, playing with other people's corpses, and I don't know if Nismus has much experience utilizing it. This again, trying to get to a rock in time to hide properly. And makes it. See, the issue is that Game Night can probably get the reactor before Nismus can get through the shields. So there's not really a way for Nismus to engage, which is unfortunate because it means that he's probably going to be waiting for Game Night. And I mean, realistically, Game Night playing ideally should just wait this out, which is, you know, unfortunate. As you can see, Game Night just told his ship to like rotate towards Nismus. Because that's all you need to do. Do. Kinda hungry. Are you guys hungry? I've been sitting in this chair for a long time now. Hungry. Hungering process. I also it makes me want to play in tournaments, which, I mean, I'm the host, so I'm not gonna do that. But like, no. If somebody's gonna host an unofficial tournament, I would definitely be there. Because I love participating. I've sacrificed official participation for sake of making enjoyable events for everyone else. As enjoyable as this night might be. Game Night wanting it to be sped up in the hopes of probably jumping on top of Nismus. The host speed control option exists exclusively in case of disconnects. Fortunately, we haven't had any. At least this section of the tournament. I don't remember the first one. First half. I'm curious if Game Night is serious, because that's gonna be a huge throw. But probably is just a bluff. Nismus may... No, I would say Nismus should try and find out, like, jockey to the side, see if the ship runs away, because that means the Game Night's still around. Nismus really shouldn't have lost those 2 large shields. That was a huge misplay. Also worth noting, Nismus does not have shields in these 2 locations, and that is kind of a big deal, because having shields in this location is so good for avoiders. It makes your entire layout stronger. You see, because these shields are better because they're more efficient. Because crew can just come up here and directly put power into them. It's one of the best placements for shields. Game Knight's back from the bathroom, it would seem. So anyway, if you put shields here, it means that they're going to be hit first, like on average, because they project further out. And when they're hit first, it means that your more efficient shields are being more efficient because they're taking more damage and they're guarding more effectively. So I would say that one of the most important things you can do is to put shields here. Different interesting note is I would say that reverse thrust is more important than forward thrust. Nismus disagrees because, as you can see, there's more standard thrust, large thrusters this way, more standard thrusters this way, 12 versus 18 and 6 versus 18. So I personally think that there's a few things I would change for Nismus' ship, but it's still fantastic. It's still been performing excellently. His piloting has been immaculate for it as well. There's been a few errors, but like clearly he beat Nug with the deck cannon rammer, and that was a very impressive display. Here we go. Game Knight not paying attention, didn't do anything to start ramping up his thrusters, is taking a lot of damage here. Nismus needs to continue to put on the pressure before Game Knight can get away. And Game Knight has to refocus and is losing shields. He's going to be losing shields. Nismus lost 2 large shields on his other side. He's very much on the time limit, but he's lost no firepower. He's effectively at full health, and Game Knight just has to run away and loses his prisms. I think that's going to be it. Game Knight stopped paying attention for a single moment, suffered dearly for it. With huge thrusters on kites, you need to keep them ramped up, you need to keep them hot. Otherwise, your opponent jumps on top of you with your standard thrusters. Nismus instantly proving me wrong. Forward standard thrusters was clearly the superior option here, and it gave him the win. I don't see Game Knight realistically winning this. I am going to call it. Nismus is the winner of the tournament. Nicely done. So let's see. So, Game Knight is in 3rd place. Air is in 2nd place. And Nismus is in 1st place.